Okay, welcome to the Node.js Community Benchmarking Workgroup meeting for January 15th. I actually forgot to start the meeting a little bit earlier, so present so far is myself, Michael, and Benedict. We looked through a couple of the issues. We discussed a new meeting time, and there's a proposal that we alternate this meeting every other Monday and Tuesday at 2 Eastern instead of 3 Eastern, so you can take a look at issue 187 for the details there. We quickly looked at issue 159, which was talking about adding Ghost as a benchmarking workload, but we'll defer discussion until Satville is at the next meeting because he's volunteered to do that work. And we're just moving on to discussing the performance impact of async hooks number 181. So do you want to take that one, Benedict, since you added it?
Definitely, yes. First of all, I'm not even sure is this for the benchmarking working group or is this for the diagnostics. So I know Young attended the diagnostics calls twice, and
Yep.
You've been talking quite a lot about async hooks, although mostly about how to use it.
Yep, that has been, it's been discussed quite a lot there.
So I've also been talking about this to Ali and a couple of other folks. And I think the way that async hooks are designed currently fundamentally works against the performance optimization.
Okay.
So by now I try to get a sense of what is actually necessary. So I think you have been in the design as well.
I've tried to follow the async design, but I haven't. I wouldn't say I'm I'm not an expert, or I don't think I'd be wanting to answer too many questions. But if you have specific ones, I could always take a shot.
Yeah.
And
so we also this is also part of the agenda for the 8 CTC call end of the month.
Right. Okay.
So Trevor will hopefully be there.
Yep.
But besides that, so what is the purpose of having? So I think one of the major killers is the destroy hook on promises. Do you think that's really useful to have it?
So, and was that added specifically for async hooks?
Yes.
Okay.
This is currently implemented on the Node side. So V8 doesn't know when a promise dies.
Right.
Because but what Node does is in the init hook it creates a wrapper around it, a C++ wrapper with a weak reference and a finalizer, and that finalizer is run when the object dies eventually. But
Right.
we can only detect this on a full GC, which means that the destroy on promise can take arbitrarily long until you actually get it, because the object first has to survive new space and survivor space, and then move to old space, and then die there.
Right. I mean, because the other discussion that I've been involved in, where knowing when a promise is no longer reachable, is around the post-mortem debugging side of things.
This is also a complaint that was, for example, mentioned in here, even by Andreas Madsen, that users complain that they sometimes don't even get the destroy, which is because the full GC doesn't happen anymore before you
Right.
the process.
Right. I guess that, I mean, I think in the case of like the post-mortem debugging, the issue is around unhandled rejections, and knowing that, if it's been rejected and it's no longer reachable, you can say, okay, well, then that rejection actually was unhandled, whereas otherwise, somebody could add a handler sometime later, right?
Yeah, I think this is also a design problem. But wasn't the proposal to change that for Node 10? The way that unhandled rejections work?
Well, there's been lots and lots of discussion, but I don't think anybody's come to something that's made anybody happy.
So
right?
I know that Matteo has this make promises safe package, which I think just does that.
So what does it do?
So, it's this package. Maybe I'm wrong. No, I'm not sure what it does essentially. Changes, well, it does not crash if there's unhandled rejection.
Like it's fairly easily to work around the fact that you're getting unhandled rejection messages. In the postmortem case, though, it's more about you actually want to be able to debug cases where like an exception was thrown.
So I think what Matteo's package does, it crashes the process. It prints a stack trace and exits the process.
Right.
When there's an unhandled rejection.
Right, but people don't like that in general because, like, when did he decide it was truly unhandled? If it's his, because that seems, I mean, that was the focus of the discussion, that it's hard to tell when it really is one that matters or one that, so he may be aggressively deciding to crash the process and take a core dump, right?
Yep.
But people also argue that there's lots of legitimate cases where you shouldn't be doing that.
Okay.
Like you really, until you can no longer add a handler, you shouldn't be assuming that rejection is unhandled. And the discussion has been, and I think there's even a change in the code to help support this. Now I don't know if it's completely right or landed or whatever, but Anna had made one which basically would fork the process on unhandled rejection, and then on GC. So when the hook, when the promise was no longer reachable, or when you stopped the process, when you were finishing, you could say, yeah, this was really unhandled. I'm going to use that fork and I'm going to create a core dump from it.
Okay, but that's really unreliable because we only know after full GC.
Right. But you do know, like, you either know that it's when you finish, so your process shuts down, yeah, or I guess if you think that it would never be collected, that would obviously be a problem too, right? Like if you get into a case where it's just there's never enough pressure to make it be collected, you could be in trouble. But there's not really a good answer is the problem. Somebody I'm working with at the University of UNB is also looking at, can we look at something like use history? So, if we see that there was an unhandled rejection when we finished, well, it's too late to generate your core dump at that point anyway, but use that information to later, to the next run, generate one at the right time.
Probably if you run this with async stack traces on, you might have enough information on the promise, yeah.
So that's exactly what he's looking at, is like, okay, can we be smart in terms of, learning from the first run or two, and then you say, okay, well, the next time, yeah, this is actually a problem, so let's get the diagnostic information. But I mentioned that because all those kind of count on being able to, may need the destroy part in addition to the async hooks, right?
Okay, yeah.
So in terms of the optimization, how does that affect the optimization?
So first of all, that means you need to have this init hook already. So even if the init hook is otherwise not useful, so the thing is, a couple of people mentioned that if you have promise chains, like the usual then change, something, then, then.
Yep.
Then these intermediate promises don't really escape. So they were thinking about, okay, you can just use escape analysis and scalar replacement and just completely avoid the allocation of all these temporary objects.
Yep.
Because what you observe in promise-heavy code is a lot of GC traffic. The more promises you use, the more GCs you see.
So is the concern that, like, because it sounds like to me, if you've been smart enough to figure out they don't escape, you could trigger the destroy hooks at the end.
First of all,
could be expensive
because you put them onto the microtask queue. But even that is an internal and it's not really observable, or at least I think the spec could be read in a way that it's not observable.
That you created a promise at all?
yeah, that we created a promise and the reaction jobs and hooked it up with the other promise. I think we can optimize that somewhat.
What would happen though if any of those promises threw an exception?
Well, the promise itself cannot throw an exception, so it just handlers.
Okay, but the code, so you're saying the then...
So if then throws, then yeah, what happens if the then handler, that's when the fulfill handler throws.
Yeah.
Still, you don't get to the promise at that point.
I guess
another job.
If you could figure out that the promise, like there's nothing that could make the promise be rejected.
Well, even if it can be made rejected, that's also fine.
But I guess
there are ways, anyways. But with the promise hooks that are used to implement async hooks,
yep,
every promise by definition already escapes. So we need to pass the promise in the parent promise to the promise hooks.
Right. Okay.
So we need to pass all of that to Node. Node then slaps the ID on it, creates a wrapper, and the wrapper is only there to support the destroy hook.
Right.
And all of that is really costly. So I did this experiment of just, there are the Bluebird benchmarks, Doxby and Parallel. And I just added async hooks to the benchmarks. And it's more than 2x slowdown without putting any hooks on it, just enabling async hooks.
Right.
And some people predict that by the end of the year, most new Node servers in production will have async hooks on.
Right.
Because many logging packages and monitoring packages will use that technology.
Right.
And that's kind of a bummer, especially if you want to use more promise-based APIs.
Right, for sure.
So we could do this ID management. So what we currently provide is, is the promise hooks. And as an embedder, you can say how much space you need inside each promise object. So Node currently says, okay, I need 2 pointers for every promise, while Chrome says, okay, I need 1 pointer. Yep. And you use these pointers to put an ID on it, which is 1, and to put a reference to the wrapper object on it, which is the 2nd pointer. But this ID management could be done inside of V8. We could just say, okay, just build V8 with this node mode, essentially, for promises, where we just increment the async, what is this, async trigger ID, and put it onto the promise each time we create a new promise.
Right.
We could even do the destroy hook if this is really necessary. But we would do it essentially the same way, that we would pre-allocate, when async hooks are on, we pre-allocate all objects in old space. And whenever a promise dies, we put it onto some scratch pad and fire an event after the GC is done.
Right. Because, I mean, maybe I'm confusing things. Are there, V8 already provides some hooks for when promises are no longer accessible, right? Is that?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what Node is doing on top using
right,
weak reference.
Okay, but not related necessarily to async hooks, but it's okay.
Yeah. So we have a design doc for this when Safia implemented it. But it might be that we implemented it in a too generic way. So, yeah.
Yeah, it would make sense. Like if there's something that can be done in V8 that then allows it to be optimized better, I don't see why people wouldn't go for that. I mean, I think that discussion is probably better in the diagnostics group, because Andreas, and the people working on the async hooks. Although, if it's not strictly async hooks, it may be a more general discussion. But I think proposing an alternative that does that in a way that Node has to do less and V8 has to do more. And certainly that's something that if we can get it, we should. If we don't resolve it before then, discussing at the diagnostic summit makes sense.
So Young and Francisca will be at the diagnostics summit, and at least Young already knows exactly a lot about this. So
right. If anything, it probably would make sense. Like, it sounds like it's. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me like there's, and I since I haven't looked at that specific part of the code, I can't speak to it that well. But it sounds like we have just generically in Node, we've added something so that we can tell when promises go away.
Yes.
And that's being used in async hooks. I think it's also being used in some of the postmortem stuff. So if there was a better way to do that, opening an issue that's saying, hey, you know, we propose providing this functionality like this instead, would be great if it's going to then let things go faster.
Yeah, I think it's two ways. First of all, is it really necessary? Or is it just nice to have, or just, oh, look, we can do this as well? But is there a concrete use case? I think the postmortem one that you mentioned with the unhandled rejection,
yeah,
that sounds interesting, and that sounds like a really valid use case.
Yep.
Maybe there are more use cases. Just have a list of, okay, we need destroy hooks on promises in some ways because A, B, C.
Yep.
And then second, okay, let's see what we can do to make this better.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, exactly, you know, start the issue saying, we've seen this, which is not great for optimization. Here are the reasons we believe why it's necessary, and even ask the questions like, yeah, in async hooks, is it really necessary or not? People should chime in with what they thought the use cases were. And then that can hopefully capture enough information to have the discussion and also to track, like, if there's a proposal for how to do it a different way. The other thing kind of interesting there is, do you think like in Chakra Core, they're going to be able to do something different as well?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, in the end, they just need to implement whatever we implement.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can also coordinate that before.
Yeah.
So Satya has been, oh, wait, no, this is, sorry, there is a document that I started. This link, specifically the section.
Okay.
And yeah, I put the numbers in there, and you see if you scroll down to the next page,
yep,
then you see the graph with the performance impact of just adding. You see there's an empty init hook, so it really literally doesn't do anything. But the performance impact is pretty high on both the Bluebird benchmark and the Wikipedia benchmark.
Right, and it comes down to just that particular problem.
And yeah, it's not doing anything except creating promises. So these benchmarks don't even do any I/O or whatever. All the I/O is mocked out.
Right.
It's just using promises. These are promise benchmarks.
Right.
And yeah, I think that there's a more serious problem about the other parts as well of async hooks. If we really expect servers in production to run this, that also slows down not just promises, but also if on every I/O event or on every timer, you need to transition between C++ and JavaScript, that's going to be expensive.
Right. I mean, the discussion right from the beginning is that people worked hard to make it very low overhead.
I'm not saying that it's people didn't do their best. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking like, but if that's not the impact that you're seeing with benchmarks, it would be good to. So these benchmarks, are they easy to run small things or?
They're pretty small, yes. So the Wikipedia one is from this article that Wikipedia wrote last year, I think, about native promises versus Bluebird promises.
Okay.
It's just a simulation of their internal tool to upload.
Right, now those are the Wikipedia. Is that with? So I see, like, you know, Bluebird and those are external promises, right? Or those
Not
benchmarks?
Bluebird. It's also this is testing the native promises. So all of this is about our V8 based promises. It's not the testing the Bluebird implementation.
Ah, okay.
It's just the Bluebird benchmark.
Okay, sorry, just by the right. So you just okay.
Yeah, but we don't have really good benchmarks yet for this. So I've been talking to this HAPI or API guy, whatever, Aaron Hammer.
Yeah, happy. Okay.
Happy, yeah, that's what you call it. Okay.
I think that's what it's called.
I'm not sure how people call it on the other side of the ocean. I think Ali always says happy, yeah, or whatever. Okay, about a benchmark, and he was sort of excited, although he doesn't really like benchmarks, and he already wrote articles about why.
Right.
But using it as a driver for node performance, he was kind of excited about it.
Okay.
And yeah, there's Fastify and some benchmarks, but that's not solely built on promises and not really dominated by promises.
Right.
And James is working on the FS Promisified.
Yeah.
But I don't think that would be. Yeah, a lot of that will still be in regular I/O.
Yep.
Just because you need to do I/O for that.
Yeah.
So it's not the ideal driver for promise performance.
Yeah, because I think promises are going to be. I mean, they're important enough that it'd be good to have a benchmark that tracks their performance.
Yep.
And I don't think any of the existing things that we have do, because none of those, like DCEIS and Acme Air, I'm pretty sure the code doesn't use promises.
Acme Air doesn't. I'm not sure about DC.
I mean, they've always talked about having a suite of benchmarks as part of DCEIS, but I don't think the first one was written to be like promise heavy or anything like that. I mean, I guess in terms of these ones, the Wikipedia, the Bluebird ones, are they like, this is the best promise benchmarks we have at this point?
Well, I wouldn't say the best, but the only sort of agreed upon.
Okay.
I mean, the Bluebird benchmarks were always used against native promises.
Right.
Which was good. So we had actually benchmarks from our competitors.
Yeah.
Now that Bluebird is a lot slower than native promises, yeah, they're still good regression tests. But
yeah, I'm just wondering, like, if they're really, they may not be perfect, but should they be something that we add to the nightly runs as a?
That would be awesome. Yes.
And how hard is that? Like, having run them, is that
easy?
Take very much?
No, it's 100 milliseconds.
Okay, so not much time. And then in terms of the scripts to run them, is that something you can throw together with little effort?
We have it on our internal waterfall already.
Okay.
I think we even have it on externally visible, at least the Bluebird ones.
Yep.
So yeah, you need to change it slightly. It was adopted to run in D8, but with a couple of changes, you can run it in Node.
Okay.
Maybe the interesting bit there is to have it running with async hooks on.
Right. Like, it's sort of like, do we want it every night with async hooks? It seems to me like just having promises, a benchmark that tests promises in general every night wouldn't be bad, because it's certainly possible we could add things. Because it sounds to me like even without async hooks turned on, shouldn't we be paying the penalty of knowing when promises go away through that, through the week? Or is it only the addition of when you turn on async hooks that?
Currently, it's only when you have at least one hook. Mm-hmm. The way it's currently written is you need to have a hook even if it's an empty function, and you need to call hook.enable. So, and then you observe the slowdown.
Okay, so because the stuff we did in postmortem, I didn't think that it used async hooks, but I could be wrong on that. Maybe it used them to find out when the promise was going away.
Okay, so on the V8 side, you just need to install the promise hook, which I think happens in Node, or from what I've seen, happens only with async hooks currently.
Okay.
Maybe they have a separate channel to also enable it for the postmortem.
Yeah, there might have been a like a command line that said, "Hey." So yeah, it seems to me like coming up with a bench. If we had a benchmark, and then we can actually see the difference between the options. And since it's so small, we could actually run it. Now it gets to be hard to put like 4, 6, and 8 on the same graph, but I don't know if it might make sense to have more of a. We could think of a graph which just showed like for master, with and without these different options.
Yeah. So I could definitely put together a JavaScript file that does it, or a separate JavaScript files that do it.
Yeah, I think that's worth. If you can open an issue and put like everything in there to say here's a benchmark we could run, because that sounds like it'd be good just to be able to point to that data. I guess you already have it here, but it seems useful to me to track promised performance regardless of this issue, right? We don't want to do something else in Node that also slows it down when we've already done it once. It sounds like potentially.
Okay, specifically, we are interested in the difference between regular runs with these workloads and runs with where we have async hooks enabled. What is it? 181 background. Okay, I created 188.
Okay.
And yeah, I will try to. I think I can do this tomorrow or during the week at least. I should be able to do it.
Sounds good. I'm on vacation next week, so
Yeah, I'm on a conference next week, so
okay.
The week after, I think we can have a run.
Okay, sounds good.
Maybe you can also mention this. I think there's a TSC meeting, right?
There's a which meeting?
A TSC meeting.
There is a TSC meeting.
CTC? No, what TSC now?
TSC. It's called TSC now. Yeah. So, I guess the thing is, to be on the TSC agenda, there usually is something like, it can either kind of be an FYI or it should be a like, what do you want the TSC to say or answer or?
I think an FYI would be good for everyone. So many people are already aware, but I think not everyone is aware, and this is kind of cross-cutting. It's performance versus postmortem versus other diagnostic tools.
Right.
Async hooks are really cross-cutting, and specifically, if you also take into account that there's this push for more promise-based APIs in Node 10.
Yep.
So
but I'm wondering, there's a diagnostic. So in here, there's a diagnostics. There's an issue there, which I think is about how to get out of experimental. Experimental. Oh, where the heck is that? Maybe it's in Node. Hold on. Where are we? I'm just searching for that. Because really, it sounds like, is it that what you really want is that async hooks don't go out of experimental until this is resolved?
Well, this could take long to resolve, especially since we need to, if you want to make it for Node 10, then this has to be in V8 by, I guess, the end of April.
Yeah, and then I guess there also is the desire to backport. So where's that?
Well, okay, I think backporting is off Yeah, okay, you can float the
No, I meant
pattern.
for async hooks. I didn't, it doesn't, maybe it's not as performant in older versions or something, but. Ah, there it is, this guy. I'm just thinking that this is where some of the discussion maybe makes sense to go. If it's, maybe this is not the right one. I'm looking because there was like an issue. That's not the right issue, but there's basically an issue that says, here are the things we need to do to get out of experimental. And
yeah,
because I think that's pretty stale, that stuff. Where the heck is?
I think I've seen this being mentioned before as well. There were also someone who mentioned that it would be nice to have the trigger ID always, not only if async hooks are enabled. A couple of asks before trigger async ID. Oh yeah, that was even Andreas who mentioned that in many places.
Right. Still trying to find, where the heck? Okay, sure there was like a tracking issue somewhere, but.
Also, it would be nice if we don't pass the promise object itself at all. If we only pass the IDs out of the 8. But that's another API or another fundamental change.
Yeah, because okay, this is the one.
Okay.
This guy. So actually, it's in terms of benchmarking, it's already there.
Oh, it's from Andreas. Okay. Yeah.
So setting up the benchmark suite to be run with and without async hooks, see that there's only a small measurable difference given our tolerance. So
yeah.
I mean, okay. I think if you put together the benchmark and we can actually get that running, and then you can we can point to it and say, well, here's at least one case where that's not true, right?
Yep.
Is probably the way to kind of deal with it. I mean, you can, because if you go to the, I'm just trying to think, like, it's, as opposed to going to the TSC and saying, hey, there's a problem here, it'd be good to get the async hooks team bought into the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because the only thing the TSC will likely do is say, hey, is it ready to go out of experimental? How's the performance? So it's best if that's sort of documented as part of the argument to make it non-experimental.
Okay. Let's put that on it.
So let's see, you created that issue, right? I'm just thinking of different ways as so there's right. First item list. Yeah, okay, so you referenced that. And I don't know, like I'm trying to think, is it worthwhile putting, like we could put a TSC review or TSC agenda on the benchmarking issue, like an FYI, you think there's a concern here?
I think an FYI as a beginning would be good, as a starting point would be really good.
Okay, so it's just like,
it's not just async hooks, it's also general pushing or moving towards a direction where things are based on promises.
Right.
So everyone is aware that the performance there, we're only starting to look now.
Right.
We actually spend a lot of time improving promises, but we use this synthetic benchmarks, and now we're looking at how this integrates with. Yeah, now there's the first version of Happy that it's solely based on promises, and core APIs based on promises are just starting now.
So I'm going to, okay, so I have TSC review, which basically says, hey, TSC, can you take a look at this?
Yep.
As opposed to putting it on the agenda where then it's going to be like, well, what decision do you want from us? So I'll just put the label for TSC review onto that one if I can. What happened here? Why am I not seeing that? Labels. Could have sworn maybe I have to refresh my page. Yeah, okay. Okay, so you can put, you might see async cooks.
Oh, you put it on 188.
Yeah, is that the wrong one?
Maybe put it on 181.
Okay, 181.
So
okay, 181. Okay.
It's the core issue. The other one is just come up with a benchmark.
Okay, right. Right. And as long as like Andrews, well, he's in the discussion there, so okay.
Andreas is in the discussion.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Anything else more on that?
Nope.
Point. Okay, so yeah, I think that'd be good. And I think if once you get to the right point, like if there's a proposal to say, let's do this, and like you said, the one you described that says, here's the reasons why we understand people need it, here's the alternatives, that in the Node repo, that's probably quite useful too.
Yep.
Okay, survey questions.
Oh, I had a look at the email that you sent around.
Yeah.
Data looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I think
to get more data. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was up to at least 141 last time I heard.
Oh, that's cool.
The goal is that we will close it at the end of January. So Dan's going to publicize some more to see if we can keep getting more people. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we can get closer to like 200 by the end of the month.
Yeah, that would be awesome. It's kind of representative almost.
Yep. And then, at that point, we'll figure out, like with Dan, okay, can we make all this data public? Can we strip it out? And then as a team here, we should probably go through it and sort of say, okay, well, we asked these first set of questions. What does it mean? What do we think it means? And then, is there, do we need a follow-up or whatever else? But yeah, there was some quite interesting data there just to start with.
Yeah.
Okay, end of Jan. We'll leave on agenda until then. Okay. Status of running Node Core benchmarks. So 127. Okay. Just looking at that one.
Yeah,
I think it's like it's basically we've let people know people are using it. Okay, that should be resolved. I'm just going to comment on the just open that, make sure that's resolved, because I think I finally just installed it on the machine. I would have preferred to have our config done, but it wasn't happening, so. Okay, and I think at this point, and being used, closing, close that comment. And then, so I don't know, I'm just looking at that issue to see if there's anything more that we need to be discussed. I don't think so. Think there's anything left in that one to?
I don't know, but I wasn't involved.
Right.
Doesn't really look like something
Okay, I'm just going to put in anything more to be discussed in this issue. And okay. I think I'm going to take off the agenda anyway until we say that there is something. And that was everything on our agenda. Was there anything else you wanted to cover this week?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. Well then, yeah, I'm out next week, but I'll try and get, if we can change the time. Like if I don't hear anything before Thursday and you don't see me change the time in the calendar, remind me. Because if there's no objections, I'll move next week's to like Tuesday at 2.
Let me quickly check. Tuesday works for me. Yep, that's the 30th. Yep, that works.
That's the, what day is that?
The 30th.
I don't think so. Like, because that's the 13th actually is a conflict with the Diagnostic Summit. So today, next week would be, it would be the 30th.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so the 30th, yeah. Okay, so it'd be Tuesday the 30th. If we move it. Okay. Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, talk to you later.
See you later. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.